So in this unit of study, we're working on measurement, and we're starting with length. Length is a measurement of distance between 2 points. Often we're measuring objects. And before this, if you haven't already watched my basic ruler introduction, you should watch that, and then come back and finish this video. So the ruler is one of our main tools to help us measure length. And you measure to the nearest whole inch, and then there's the smaller tick lines. Our ruler only has 4 of them, 1, 2, 3, and 4 spaces, so that each one is 1/4, 2/4, which is the same as 1/2, and 3/4. The ones in the example has smaller measurements in between as an 1/8, but we're only measuring to the nearest 1/2 inch. Or 1/4 of an inch. So on your ruler, that should be easy enough to see because we don't have the extra little lines in between. So their first example is measuring a button. They want to measure the width of the button. So we want to make sure that the one end of the button lines up. I don't really like the way they put it underneath. If I was going to measure it with my ruler, I wouldn't put my ruler down here. I would put my ruler right up here. So it lines up nicely with the widest part of the button. If you can, put it over top of the object so you get the longest part of the object. So we're finding the width of the button to the nearest 1/2 inch and 1/4 inch. So we place the ruler against one edge of the object with the 0 line lined up, and then we measure. So I find that it's over 1 inch. Here's my 1.5 inch mark. Looks like it's closer to 1.5 inches than it is to 2 inches. So to my nearest 1/2 inch is 1.5 inches. But if I'm looking at my quarter marks, I have 1 inch, 1/4, 2/4, and really it's kind of closer to this 3/4 mark. So it's closer to 1 3/4 of an inch. 3/4 is more of a specific mark than the 1/2 because the 1/2 is bigger chunks. Then we're trying to find the length of a paper clip to the nearest 1/2 inch. For this example, they want us to find the length of a paper clip to the nearest 1/2 inch and the nearest 1/4 inch. I'm using a small standard size paper clip. If you're using a larger paper clip, you get different numbers, but that's perfectly okay. So the first step is to place the ruler against the edge of the object and line it up at the 0 mark on the ruler, which for us is the very end of the ruler. But what I'm going to actually do is put the paper clip on top of the ruler just so it's slightly easier to see. All right, so looking at this, I'm seeing that it ends slightly before the 1 1/4 mark. So if I'm measuring to the nearest 1/2 inch, I'm either rounding down to 1 inch or rounding up to 1.5. And because it's less than the 1/4 mark, I'm going to round down and say that's 1 inch. But if I'm measuring to the nearest 1/4 mark instead of the 1/2 mark, then I would measure to that 1 1/4 mark because that's super close to the actual length of the paper clip. So it would be 1 1/4 inches long. They want us to explain how you can tell the difference between the 1/2 inch and the 1/4 inch mark when measuring an object with a ruler. Some rulers, the 1/2 inch mark is longer than the 1/4 inch. On our ruler, we can't tell that way. The best way to tell is that each of the 1/2 inch marks are directly in the middle of the inch marks. If they're off to the side, there are 1/4 and 3/4 inch. But when they're directly in the middle, that is when they are the 1/2 inch mark. So I said the main difference between the 1/2 inch and the 1/4 inch on our ruler is that it's right in the middle of each inch. And the final question on this page is, will you ever have the same answer when measuring to the nearest 1/2 inch and measuring to the nearest 1/4 inch? Explain your reasoning. Well, if my paper clip was actually about 1 inch long, rounding to the nearest 1/2 inch would be 1 inch, and rounding to the nearest 1/4 inch would also be 1 inch. So you can have the same measurement if it's at 1 inch increments or even a 1/2 inch increments. So if they measured to be 2.5 inches long, that would be the same for both the half and quarter measurement scales. So I said, yes, if the object is close to a full inch or a 1/2 inch measurement, they will be the same. And our final question on the page, there's actually one more. Be precise. Circle the most precise measurement of the button in the first activity. So in the first activity, our button looks like the line goes right here between the 1/2 and 3/4 mark. But I'm noticing that it's much closer to the 3/4. So my answer is 1 3/4 inches. So the more precise measurement is 1 3/4 inches. Now I'd like you to do the questions on the next page. In the description below, there's answers to some of the questions, so you can check your answers. Don't look at the answer page until you've already tried them to see if you're doing it right.